Good afternoon and welcome to another Clearwater Jazz Holiday Foundation's Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions. You know, we have another treat for you. I mean, he is no stranger to Clearwater Jazz. Today's educator is none other than Austin Vickrey, and the topic is playing saxophone in style. The importance of learning different styles. So you know what, whether you're a saxophonist or you're a trumpet player or your rhythm section, you're going to learn some great things from Austin today. And don't forget, if you have any kind of questions or anything like that, go into the chat feature, type them in, and we'll make sure we leave some time at the end of our session today to answer any questions. If you're enjoying today's session, you want to check out more upcoming sessions, just reach out to us at www.clearwaterjazz.com/education. You can find an archive of everything we've done. It's a wealth of information there. Also, we love your feedback. You have future sessions that you want to suggest, or tell us how well you really enjoy all of Austin's sessions. You can email us right over here at info@clearwaterjazz.com. And we want to thank our sponsors today, because without them, this wouldn't be possible. So, you know, for the studio archives, you know, go to our website, you know, and that's brought to you by our friends over there, Blue Water Wealth Management and at Stewart Partners and Duke Energy as well. Don't forget to check out all the Young Lions podcasts wherever you stream, and that's brought to you by our friends at Marine Max Clearwater. And just search Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions wherever you stream. You know, where do I start? I mean, Austin has had so many amazing sessions here. Just to name a few: an approach to playing lead alto saxophone. That's my dream, to play lead alto saxophone. Baritone basics, baritone sax basics, or how to navigate chord changes, something we all need to know. And, you know, he's done a lot of our What I Love About series. I mean, we're talking Charlie Parker, Paul Desmond, Phil Wood, Stan Getz, Chris Potter. The name goes on and on. This man knows his stuff, and he's teaching us a lot of great things. So if you don't know him personally, yes, he is a saxophonist. He's a woodwind specialist, a composer, arranger, music educator who currently resides in none other than the beautiful St. Petersburg, Florida. He was born and raised in Utah, and he's now here in Tampa Bay. He holds a Bachelor of Music Saxophone Performance from the University of Utah and a Master's of Music and Jazz Studies from the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music. So you've heard him play in the area. You've heard him play on the big stage. And don't forget, he's also an adjunct professor of music here in the Mirror program. You know, he's been there in St. Petersburg College and also at Johns Hopkins. I know him as a colleague, and you're going to enjoy everything that he's going to share with us today. Hey, Mr. Vickrey, the stage is all yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Knodel. Appreciate it. It's a pleasure being here as always, and I'm happy to be doing another virtual session for the Clearwater Jazz Holiday. So today is about playing in the style, and I am gonna focus primarily on saxophone today, but I think we can safely say that no matter what instrument you play, you should be well versed in many styles as a musician and a performer, because you never know what situation you're going to be in where you might have to play something you're not familiar with, or maybe, you know, something that's not played as often. So, you know, my main point with learning how to play in the style is that it's beneficial to you to do that, because you're going to get more work. You are going to be known as a versatile player. The phone will be ringing, or the email will be coming in, or the texts will be coming in. You know, the more things that you can do to be a well-rounded musician, the more work you're going to get. And also, excuse me, the more you're going to discover more about your own style and your own personal preferences and how you play and your own approach to, solos on songs or interpreting a melody of a song, that kind of thing. So that's why I'm doing this. I just find it really, really important to try to learn as many styles as you can of playing. And by style, I kind of mean genre, but there are things within genres that are stylistic to that genre of music. So there's so much that we could go over. I hope that I can just scratch the surface here today. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen and collapse the window of pictures because I'm always going to look over there at them. It's my bad habit. It's hard to break. Okay. So you should be seeing my screen. And I found that I'm doing a keynote. I'll send the PDF in. I haven't sent it yet, but I'll send a PDF of this keynote that I'm going to use into Clearwater Jazz Holiday, and they will put it up on the Clearwater Jazz Holiday education site, where once the session is over and it's been uploaded, you can access this PDF for your own edification. All right, friends, here we are, playing saxophone in style, the importance of learning different styles, created for Clearwater Jazz Holiday Jazz Master Virtual Sessions by yours truly. Here we go. So why? Why learn different styles of saxophone playing? And I kind of touched on it, but let's pinpoint it a little bit. It makes you a more versatile musician. It's going to put you in a position where you're not just known for being able to play just jazz, but you can play, rock, you can play funk, maybe you can play some early jazz, these kinds of things. And, I've gotten so many different calls over the years of people who've recommended my name. Grateful for that, and for different types of gigs of all genres and all styles. Some I've been able to do, some I've learned a great deal from doing, and some I didn't do so well at. And I learned, okay, I better learn this. Or I just say, no, I can't do that. So I lost out on the money, and maybe I should, revisit this later and try to learn. So there you go, more versatile. Knowing many styles gives you a deeper understanding of music in general. You're able to see how different how can I say, different aspects of the styles permeate throughout the historical context of styles and musical styles. But again, I'm going to be focusing mostly on saxophone style today. So understanding historical style and context is important for being able to perform what is asked of you on certain gigs. And this is just super, super, super important. And I'll touch more on this later. And once again, you will work more as a performing artist. There have been fellow saxophone players that I went to school with who they just couldn't stop playing one particular artist and transcribing, and it was great. It sounded amazing, but they couldn't play anything else. And, I remember the one time I needed a sub, and I couldn't get a sub to play for this funk rock band type of thing. And I called this particular person, and they were like, yeah, I don't play that. And I'm like, why not? I need somebody. Can you recommend somebody? Well, needless to say, I didn't call that person anymore. So, he lost out on work. If he's not going to be able to do the gig, then I got to find somebody who can. So my philosophy has always been, I want to be the guy that when the phone call comes in, I can say, if it's worth my time and the pay, and I'm interested in doing it, I want to be the person that says, yes, I can do that. Yes, I can do it. Yes. More work, more connections, more networking, you know, more money, depending on your approach to it. If you're a performer, an artist, or if you're just doing it for fun, it just depends. So a lot of those things have to come into play and are factors in whether or not you decide to do a gig. But my thing is, if you're going to perform, and I'm talking to hopefully an audience of musicians or budding musicians who want to do gigs and play and perform, that you want to be versatile. You don't want to be just that one dude that just does this one thing right over here all the time, because how often is that gonna, you know, is that gonna pay your bills? I don't know. You never know. But anyway, here we go. Let's talk about it. Saxophone styles. Now that style of that young lady is pretty good there. I don't think I could pull it off though. I'm kidding. So some various, and there's probably more I'm missing, but I'm just giving a brief overview. There's the classical approach, and I studied that in college. Most saxophone players who do go to college get exposed to that at some point. Classical comes from European traditions as well as from some American military traditions. It branches out from, because the saxophone was invented in Europe. So it comes from a European instrument maker. We're going to talk briefly about that. There's the early jazz era. So turn of the century, we're talking 1900s into the 20s, and then we get the swing era. And then later, after the 30s into the 40s and 50s, even some of the 60s, we're talking about bebop, hard bop, and a lot of that's kind of my favorite stuff to study. It is for a lot of people, and we get a lot of vocabulary, which I talked about last week. We talked about rhythmic vocabulary, but there's a lot of jazz vocabulary, harmony, melody, rhythmic vocabulary that comes from this era. And it's an era that a lot of people like to study. After that, we've got some rock, funk, and fusion stuff. So we're talking 70s, 80s kind of a deal. And then contemporary and pop music. This can encompass anything. We could talk, you know, we're talking about like maybe late 80s up until the present. And it didn't seem like that used to be a long span of time, but that's coming up on 30, 40 years now. So there's a lot there, and it kind of starts to just meld together. And we're going to talk about it a little bit towards the end. So it pulls from all the previous styles. But here we go. Let's jump right in. Classical saxophone. So who's this guy pictured? Well, that's Adolphe Sax. And he is, how cliche is that, right? Sax. Guy with the last name Sax invented the saxophone. Well, what can you say? He's a French-Belgian instrument maker, or was, and it was patented in 1846. He also taught at the Paris Conservatory for a while. Saxophone was originally designed to improve on the tone of the bass clarinet, believe it or not. If you're familiar with the bass clarinet, it's giant, really big. You have to set it on the ground. There's a little stand, and I play bass clarinet too. But it's basically similar to the bass clarinet, only this time he decided to make it a conical bore instead of just a straight cylindrical bore. He made it a conical bore, which means that it opens up and gets wider as it goes down. And the bass clarinet has a little curve with the bell that comes up, and that's where the saxophone idea came from. It was based on trying to make a different sound, or an improving sound on the bass clarinet sound. And I don't know if you can really do that. I love bass clarinet, separate from saxophone. There's no more to that. Saxophone was intended for use with military bands and orchestras originally. Became kind of a novelty instrument before being taken seriously. It took quite a while for the saxophone to be taken seriously as a serious musical instrument. A lot of people were using it for novelty type of pieces. And I think that's one of the things I didn't necessarily include in here, but we can touch on it briefly. It's not in my PowerPoint, but It did spread to the US, where it became used in American military bands, concert bands, and didn't put concert bands on there, and as a solo instrument. Right around the turn of the century, saxophones, probably we're talking early 1900s, where the saxophone started to become a popular instrument. This is where I will mention real quick the novelty. There's one saxophone player named Rudy Wiedoeft, and I didn't put this in my thing. I intended to. I think I must have forgot. But Rudy Wiedoeft, he would kind of do, and this was, we're still getting touches of some of that romantic period from the previous century, kind of folding into the United States musical traditions. And he would take classical type songs, or it mostly stems from vaudeville, actually, where he would kind of play in a very cheesy, hammy, soupy kind of a style. It's hard to explain, but like if I take a little bit of tenor here and kind of do that, and vaudeville was this, it was like the precursor to the modern day musical, where it's comedy and it's music and it's people goofing and doing jokes and whatnot. But some of this style kind of sounds like really, really cheesy, campy stuff. Like, let's see, I'll play. We've got some sound there. So it's kind of funny to laugh at. It's just hilarious now, and I'll do it sometimes when I'm around other musicians. It just is a fun little joke. But if you check it out, Rudy Wiedoeft, Wiedoeft, Rudy Rudy, Rudy Wiedoeft. He did a piece called Saxophone. It's spelled sax-o-phun, and he makes use of where I talked about in a previous session, and the slap tongue in a previous session, and I talked about some of those advanced techniques, but he used it in a very comical way. So that's some novelty for you on the saxophone. All right. Let's talk a little bit more about classical style. Now, a lot of students are going to be introduced to this style early on if you're in band, or if you just go and do music education at college, if you're going to study musical education as your degree and you're a saxophone player, chances are you're going to have to take some lessons and you're going to have to learn some repertoire. But to play the classical style, you want to use a dark or closed mouthpiece, and dark sounding and closed mouthpiece. And I have this, I'm going to turn the, let me see, I got to see, there we go, okay. So I'm going to hold this up, but this is a classical mouthpiece. It's hard rubber, and this is the Van Doren AL3 Optimum. It's a really good classical mouthpiece. It's got a very closed tip opening. It means it does not have a wide curve at the tip. And it's got a very small baffle. And baffle is the material on the inside right here. That's what's called the baffle. So the less material, the more open and dark it's going to sound. And the chamber inside is round. Okay, so that's going to help produce a more dark and open classical sounding tone. Again, this is a Van Doren, and I've got a couple listed here. Some saxophone players, if they're watching this, they've probably heard of some of these pieces already, but the big ones, Van Doren, Eugene Rousseau mouthpiece, makes a nice studio classical mouthpiece. And the classic is the Selmer C star. And I had one of those. I think I got rid of it. It might have become chipped or something, but I had one of those to study on. So the classical style is going to make use of the vibrato, very much so. So typically more fast and wide of a bravado. And we've talked about vibrato before, and I'm just going to kind of give an example here with this Rousseau. I'm just changing my jazz mouthpiece out really quickly. Oh, sorry, it's not Rousseau, it's my Van Doren Optimum. But to play the classical sound, you should be able to produce a more dark or round, we like to say round open. We use all these words to characterize timbre or color of sound. So as to blend with the accompanying instruments, whether it's solo and piano, or concert band, military band, marching band. You want to be able to blend. The sound is not designed for you to be super, super bright. And so I'm just going to, and this reed is a little different. I use a harder reed when I play classical saxophone, but this sound is definitely going to be darker. So here's just a little example of so I can kind of, I've got a lighter reed on, and the higher I go, the lighter the reed, the more bright I can make it sound, but I will typically go a full strength harder on classical stuff because it takes more control, and I need a little stiffer of a reed, a more hard reed on this closed mouthpiece. I'm playing on a 3 Van Doren ZZ, which is designed for jazz. But I would probably even go with a Van Doren 3.5 or even a 4. Some people don't like playing on 4s. They're kind of tough to play on, but for me, it works, and it all depends on your musculature and how developed your embouchure is. But the point is to be able to produce a nice, sweet tone, just like that, and it's much different to be able to play. So, and that's just me I'm trying to remember this little piece by Paul Creston, and I think I improvised a little bit of it. I know I did. I used to have some of that memorized. But anyway, that's some classical saxophone. So learning how to do the vibrato is really important to making you sound like you're playing in the style, and having that nice, dark, round, open kind of a sound rather than a more edgy, piercing or bright sound that's more characteristic of jazz playing. So, and now there are people out there that do perform classical saxophone, believe it or not. And here are some, let me go back, there we go. Here are some references for you, and I would encourage you to check this stuff out. These are artists and or composers in the classical saxophone genre and style, and I think not all of them are performers, but I definitely know Alexander Glazunov was a composer who wrote a concerto that I performed when I was in college. Marcel Mule was a French saxophone educator and performer. Sigurd Rascher, also another educator and performer. He created a saxophone that had no keys. It was just strict cone in order to demonstrate and perform the overtone series of the saxophone. Really, really interesting. So check out Sigurd Rascher. He's got a book out on Altissimo, the overtone series called Top Tones for Saxophone. So you can check that out. Eugene Rousseau, I think he's still living and teaching at University of Indiana, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe that's Otis Murphy, but Eugene is one of the oldest out there living classical saxophone educators and performers. Donald Cinta, Larry Teal also wrote a book on the complete saxophone method called the Larry Teal method. Otis Murphy, Fred Hebke. Fred Hebke has got his own brand of reeds. You might have seen them. Harvey Patel, Claude DeLong. So these are just a few, and there's others out there. I'm sure I'm missing, but this is going to get you started if you're looking to check out more classical style saxophone playing. All right, let's move on. Historically, early jazz saxophones, the early 1920s. Styles from this type of era, or this styles are influenced by European and African musical traditions. So this is where we start to see kind of a melting pot in the musical world. We see that cauldron bubbling up to form what we would call jazz later on, about a couple decades later, and it started to move up the Mississippi from New Orleans. The saxophone was used to mimic the sound of the human voice a lot, right? Its tone started to develop more, and it can almost sound on some early recordings like a violin, which is really, really interesting. But it's one of the closest ones, in my opinion, to be able to mimic the human voice. When it was invented, they started to make it and manufacture it in a variety of keys. And this is where we get the concept of the key of B flat. The saxophone is the key, the alto saxophone is the key of E flat, and the tenor saxophone is made in the key of B flat. And they are pitched differently. So what that means is if I play a C on a piano, it's, that's a C. If I play a C on the saxophone against the piano, it's not going to sound like a C. It's a C on the saxophone, but it doesn't sound that way. So it's how the pitch sounds. If I play a C on an alto saxophone, which is this one, okay, this one. If I play a C on that, it's going to sound like an E flat on the piano. So we call the alto saxophone an E flat alto saxophone because its pitch of C, its written pitch, sounds like an E flat. This also works for the baritone saxophone, which is almost double in size of this thing. And I don't have it out, but I think hopefully you do know what a baritone saxophone looks like. And then we've got the tenor saxophone. That was the one I played earlier, slightly larger, got a different neck on it, the bigger bell. Okay, this one is pitched in B flat. So that means that if I play a C on the tenor saxophone, it's going to sound like a B flat on the piano. So it's a B flat instrument. Now the same thing goes for the soprano. And I have a soprano here. Looks kind of like a clarinet, but it's not. It's got the ergonomics of a saxophone, and it's just straight. So, and it was made in a variety of keys. I actually have one that was pitched in the key of C, and we used to call those C melody saxophones. And I have one. My grandfather gave it to me when I first started playing saxophone, and he played it a little bit, but he never pursued it. But when I first started playing as a teenager, he said, "Here, I want you to have this." And it's a really, really nice old saxophone. It doesn't sound great. I don't perform with it. It's more sentimental. It doesn't have a lot of value because those instruments just weren't really made very well. But they used to have them. I think they had saxophones in other keys other than C, B flat, and E flat, but I'm not sure on that. I'd have to double check that to be accurate, so I don't want to say that. And the saxophone was used in early jazz, used in small combos and dance bands. So see pictured here is Sidney Bashay. And Sidney Bashay was one of the first instrumentalists and early jazz instrumentalists to bring the saxophone to popularity and become like a super popular instrument. And exclusively, he would record with the soprano. So you see him playing there. He's playing on a soprano. And his style is very, very, very distinct. And I can try to copy it, but it's very, very tricky. He's got a very, very thick vibrato. Okay, and I've got it here where it says the saxophone style, almost comical to a point, but I don't even know if I'm really hitting this, but I'm trying to. If you check out Sidney Bashay, I don't know if we have time to do that. I'm probably not going to have time to click on all the links, but check out Sidney Bashay. You've got this ragtime bouncy feel, and ragtime was more not necessarily triplety swing, but it's almost dotted eighth kind of a swing. When you would mess up the rhythm of the even eighths, they would call that ragging. So it's kind of got this kind of a bouncy, you know, if you think of that maple leaf rag, it's, I don't know, it's not even necessarily super swing. It just depends. But your sound could be darker or lighter or brighter, depending. I mean, some of those old recordings, it's hard to tell exactly how bright that sound was, but from what I'm listening, Sidney Bashay definitely had a brighter tone. And then you're also going to hear in this saxophone style a heavy use of inflection, meaning bends, scoops, vibrato. Okay, very still kind of campy, meaning, you know, just a little cheesy. But again, we're making kind of this, it takes time for these styles to develop, and it's kind of like we're in this transition from 1800s into the 1900s, and you know, things are changing all over the place, socially, economically, musically, historically. So this is very indicative of this style, is to have the bends and the scoops and the vibrato. Some early style musical, early jazz style saxophone references. I mentioned Sidney Bashay. Pictured here is Frankie Trumbauer, who played with another famous trumpet player known back in the day, Bix Beiderbecke. I'm sure, Mr. Kernodle, you're familiar with Bix, but Frankie and Bix would play together very often, and it's a very, very deliberate type of style. Barney Bigard, who's also known for playing clarinet, is another good reference here, and Bud Freeman as well. So now there was a website where you could go to check out these early jazz things, and I think it's been dissolved, but I found an alternative reference, and I'm gonna make, I forgot to include that. I'm gonna include that in my PDF here when I make it. I can pull it up. I think it was called Red Hot Jazz was the website. It's the archive. So syncopatedtimes.com, and I'm pulling it up very quickly right now. So if you go to Syncopated Times, it's got all of these, it's got an archive of early jazz from before 1900 into the mid-1900s even. And you can hit, if you hit Red Hot Jazz, you can look at the musicians, the bands. It mentions definitely Louis Armstrong in there. So definitely something that you want to check out if you're interested in this. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this right now while I'm thinking about it. Come back here, and I'll put that website right in there, easy as pie. Boom. Can check out that website, and that'll be included in the PDF. All right, let's move forward. So we've got the swing era. So late 1920s and 30s. Pictured here is the Count Basie sax section. Swing eras grew out of the New Orleans tradition. Saxophone became the standard instrumentation for the wind section in dance bands, big bands, 2 altos, 2 tenors, eventually 1 baritone. Sometimes it was just 4 in the earlier bands, but then we added the baritone saxophone. And then most of the solos are going to be short, in like 8 to 12 bars maybe. And then also there could be musical features. So like Ellington and Basay would feature their strongest players on a ballad or something. So you can hear, if you listen to the big bands and you hear some of those solos, this is the style we're talking about. So here's where we start to feel more of a triplety swing feel, less dotted 8th and 16th kind of a feel. It's loosened up a little bit more, so we're starting to feel this more. All right. Though sometimes in early stock written band charts, you'll see swing is notated as dotted 8th, 16th. And that they want you to be a little bit more pointed with that style. So it's more dated style when you see that. So the use of vibrato in section playing as well as in solo playing. Your sound should blend with the section. Lead alto should come out more on top. If you're in the saxophone section, you want to follow the lead. And I did a little masterclass on lead alto playing in a big band. You can check that out for more information. I won't go into too much here in this era. Heavy use of inflections. So again, bends, scoops, vibrato, and you're following the style, and the lead alto saxophone player is going to set that tone style for you. And if you're a lead alto player, then all you got to do is go listen. Okay, go listen. Or if you're a tenor player, if you're that tenor 1 chair and you're playing a Basay tune or an Ellington tune, and you're playing a transcription of this and you want to sound authentic, this is what I'm talking about. You're not going to come in and start playing Michael Brecker on an Ellington solo. That doesn't work very well, okay? You want to be able to emulate the style. So the best way to do that is to listen. Listen. So go check out, I've got a bunch of musical references for the swing era, and this doesn't even really scratch the surface, honestly, but these are the big names. You got Coleman Hawkins, who played with Fletcher Henderson's band. Lester Young's huge, okay, in the Basay band. Johnny Hodges, one of my favorite lead alto sax players, very distinctive sound. He set such an important precedent with lead alto playing from the Ellington band. Very distinctive, very recognizable. Benny Carter, who played with a lot of different bands and had his own band, he was like, he did everything. He even arranged for some Basay too. So he's fantastic. Check out Benny Carter. Willie the Lion Smith played originally with Jimmy Lunsford and in Ellington's band. He took over for Johnny Hodges when Johnny Hodges left. Harry Carney, definitely known in Ellington's band. He was with him through his whole career, and that's the baritone saxophone guy right there. That's the signature baritone sax player for Duke Ellington. You've got Chu Berry, Leon Chu Berry, played with Fletcher Henderson, who had a saxophone custom made for him. It was a certain style, certain material. And so if you see online, these Chu Berry horn, and they're old. I'm not sure how resilient they are. I haven't played one, but yeah. So he was one of the major players. Ben Webster, can't leave out Ben Webster, played with Ellington's band. Jimmy Dorsey with the Dorsey Brothers. Marshall Royal played with Basay, Ellington, Lionel Hampton. You can hear him on those. I think he's on that Atomic Basay album, if you go check that out. And that's where I listen to try to play lead alto for Basay, as I'm listening to Marshall Royal style. Very, very similar to Hodges, but not quite as much wide of a vibrato. It's a little bit more narrow in the vibrato on that. And then there's some others in this era worth mentioning. Lucky Thompson, who played with Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie on a few recordings. Earl Bostic, Eddie Lockjaw Davis, Illinois Jacquette, and the last two were known for being that Texas tenors. There was like a group of them called the Texas Tenors, and they had kind of they use the growling kind of a thing. It's definitely more assertive playing. So I'm making use of the growling. I got the bends, you know. I can do two at the same time, so I can growl and I can bend at the same, you know. So check out these cats. Now, Lester Young, if you go back to Lester Young, his style is definitely more. Not as much growling, a darker tone, and the vibrato is quick and short. Not very wide, but quick and short. So more fast and not as wide. So there you go. If you listen to these guys, they each had their own styles that they would contribute to their bands or their solo careers as well, or their solo recordings as well. Let's keep going. So now here comes the big one, Bebop and Hard Bop saxophone from the 40s and all the way through into the early 60s. Bebop became a vehicle for soloists to be more creative and expressive. Small combo playing became more popular over dance bands, and that's because of World War II. People got drafted, went over to the war. There weren't as many big bands going on. They even had a recording band, and that kind of killed things. And people came back and started playing more in combos. Combos started taking over. It was more of like the musician's music, and people really dug it. They could still dance to it, but at the same time, it was more artistry, improvisation, virtuosic playing. We've got lots of formats. There were trios, quartets, quintets, but definitely on the smaller side rather than on the larger side. So the dance band era was coming to kind of a close. Even though there were still some, it just was less in popularity. We are going to the style of bebop and hard bop saxophone. So in this style, you need to be able to play at faster tempos. So practicing slowly with a metronome, that's how you're going to be able to do that. And really choosing your language, transcribe some of the greats. You've got all the technology available now. It's amazing. We can slow stuff down. We can pick it apart. It's easier to do. You can transcribe a solo so fast now. Now, if you don't, you want to be good at the skill, the more you do it, you don't have to slow it down. And I recommend that. It's harder, it's more difficult, and it takes longer to do, but definitely worth it. You're going to ingrain it more in your mind if you do it by ear and not having to slow it down. So you can kind of listen. You start to hear some of the same phrases, so you'll be able to like pick it up and say, oh, I've heard that before. I know where that comes from. Boom, I can play that. Now, vibrato, in terms of style, can be more personalized here. There was less wide vibrato, meaning a lot of pitch bend, and not as fast. So the vibrato is not as fast, meaning pulses per second. I'm not measuring it, but swing style can be played more straight, but not fully even eighths. This is kind of where you get this straighter swing concept. The faster you play on swing or bebop, the less swing you have. Because if I'm playing, you know, say like there's a medium thing, but if I try to play it so it starts to sound a little bit more dated, okay, like an earlier style, and they weren't going for that. So kind of do this in between. there's bebop. You know, you've got the chromaticism going on, but the faster you play, the less swingy your notes are going to be. So they're going to be more straight. There's variations on this. People started or a lot of artists can lay back more on the time, and a lot of artists can play more forward on the time. And so it just depends on what you're listening to. You're talking about, say, Dexter Gordon. Dexter Gordon he laid back so much on the beat. Sonny Rollins loved to lay back on his beat, where you're listening to Coltrane. Coltrane's a little bit more playing in front of the beat. We're not talking about fast notes. We're talking about right in the time, okay? Not necessarily, we're talking about amount of swing here. Let's keep going. Understanding the harmonic and rhythmic concepts, or understanding of chord extensions and heavy syncopation and improvisations. This is indicative of the bebop style. So it's really important to study that. And when listening to Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Barry Harris, a lot of these bebop artists to get these concepts. Lots of typical jazz vocabulary in this style. Yeah, I could play Charlie Parker lick after Charlie Parker lick. The big one is this one, where you go. There's a Charlie Parker lick. There's tons of vocabulary. Let's see, what's another one? There's Honeysuckle Rose, ba-ba-doo-ba-dee. So there's a lick right there. There's a piece of vocabulary. Jazz lick number 62A. Okay, it's everywhere. You're listening to this style, you're picking up a ton of vocabulary. And this is a very, very, very truncated list of the references for this style of music. There are many. I'm probably leaving out a ton. Of course, Charlie Parker, Sonny Rollins, Coltrane, Cannonball Adderley, Sonny Stitt, Joe Henderson, Dexter Gordon, Jackie McLean, Ornette Coleman. He was more on the later side. We're talking about 60s here, late 50s, 60s, where it starts to get kind of more avant-garde, and I kind of left that out because that one's kind of a tricky one to talk about, but it's kind of there at the tail end of that hard bop. Hard bop focuses a lot more on, it's almost like blues combined with bebop in a way. So Cannonball Adderley kind of crossed that into that genre of hard bop. You got Wayne Shorter, who also kind of crosses genres here. You got some of these that aren't exclusively bebop or hard bop, but they lasted forever, and they evolved with the music. So, but check out these guys. Phil Woods, I did a thing on him. Art Pepper, Lou Donaldson, Eddie Harris. I love Eddie Harris. Paul Desmond, Jerry Mulligan, Eric Dolphy, another avant-garde-ish kind of player. It's like Charlie Parker on 15 cups of coffee. It's like Eric Dolphy was just so nuts, crazy. Oh, bass clarinet. Let's bring that back around. He also played bass clarinet, Eric Dolphy, and it just sounds incredibly interesting, weird, strange, out there, but also technically amazing, virtuosic playing. Very interesting. If you haven't checked out Eric Dolphy, I think Out to Lunch, you should check out that album, Out to Lunch, Eric Dolphy. Also had Don Cherry on that. All right, let's move into, we've got rock, funk, fusion saxophone. So late 50s to the present here, pictured as, of course, Michael Brecker. What can you say about Michael Brecker? What can't you say about Michael Brecker? But funk and fusion, stepping out, this style includes stepping outside of the existing boundaries of harmony, song form, and earlier traditions. So kind of departing from that, you know, American Songbook, AABA form of songs. And this has been developing since the late 50s of bebop. And it just kept going and going and going. Excuse me, sorry. more even 8th and 16th note groove-oriented melodies and compositions are coming out of this era. Now, if you're going into rock, kind of branched away. Something happened in the 50s where you get this rock and R&B and Elvis and oh, what's the one that I can't. My brain is like, I can't remember what was up. But we're talking about like Chubby Checker and that kind of stuff where it's more kind of blues oriented and it kind of trails off into rock and roll, right? And then jazz kind of took like a hard left turn and went into the funk fusion avant-garde era. So you kind of get this like little split going on. So rock, funk, fusion, R&B, all this stuff, check it all out. So in terms of the style, rock and R&B, not as harmonically complex. You don't have to be, when you're playing this kind of music, you don't have to be crazy, okay? When you're playing rock and R&B, you want to stick to the style. Again, I had, real quick, I think I've told this story, but I was playing in a funk band, a cover band, and I had to take a solo on Mustang Sally. It was like a little 8-bar solo, and it's all just one chord. And I was playing alto, and I was playing a bunch of jazz bebop stuff from school. And on the break, the leader came up to me and said, hey, man, you sound great. Don't ever play that jazz crap again. Of course, he didn't say crap, but he said, don't ever play that stuff, man. Go listen to some Junior Walker. Go listen to King Curtis. Like, all right. So I had to go listen to some of these other guys to get the style right. And I sure did not play Charlie Parker for that anymore because I needed the work and I wanted to play. But yeah, your improvisations could be more simple. Use of pentatonics and blues scale sounds are the way to go when you're playing some of these older tunes like Mustang Sally and whatnot. Not as sweet of a tone, probably more of a bright and edgier tone you want to have. For my alto, I have a brighter metal mouthpiece that I'll sometimes use when I want to play, with a brighter tone. I'll do that. I try not to have a different mouthpiece for every style. I want to be able to do all the styles on one mouthpiece if I can. So that's really what you're striving for if you're a saxophone player. And I can do most things on my hard rubber Meyer, but sometimes when I'm feeling edgier and I want to try something out, I'll pull this baby out and it lets me kind of have that brighter tone. On tenor, I've been playing on a metal one, but I've got a hard rubber mouthpiece here that I use when I want to play some more sweeter stuff, maybe like Stan Getz, where I want my tone to be a lot more breathy and darker, not as edgy, right? Now, Getz could get edgy in the high register, but still, if I want to sound a little bit more sweeter and not have as much of a punch to my sound, I'll sometimes switch over to this mouthpiece. But for the most part, if you can get one mouthpiece that will do everything for you outside of classical, you should do that. Solo sections are reduced down more in this type of style to leave more room for the vocalist. So you're more of kind of like an aside and, oh, here, let me take a break. Here's a little solo for you, and then we're going to come back. That's your role. Your role is to not play the most interesting jazz line ever. Your role is to fill that space and accompany. That's what the role is in this type of music. So it's really important to understand that. There's a high use of that growl tone. You can use that growl. If you overuse it, maybe you start to sound a little, I don't know, like you just learned how to do it and you're not stopping. So be judicious with how you use the growl tone. Just go listen a lot. If you go listen to these recordings and listening to these artists, you'll be able to get an idea of how and when to use this growl and these techniques. When we're talking about funk and fusion, it's a little bit more open harmonically, as well as more 1 and 2 chord solo sections where you got like a 1-2 chord vamp. The use of extended upper register or altissimo is happening quite a bit in some of this genre. So it still brings with it some of the virtuosity from the hard bop era, but now we're starting to use exclusively this upper register stuff. So like what I'm talking about is to play like more up here in the upper register. Way up there. And I can do like more funk. Right? It's more of like a swunk or a swing funk kind of a thing. But yeah, using these upper register notes, you see that a lot, or you start to hear that a lot. Solos, let's see, blah, 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 blah. Oh yeah, not as sweet of a tone. Use a more bright and edgier tone or mouthpiece. That's very characteristic of this style. Fun fact, if you use a softer reed, you'll get some of that brightness in there, but it depends on your mouthpiece. Like my mouthpiece has a bit higher of a baffle, and so I only use a 3 on this. I could use a 2.5, but when I go up into the upper register, it's going to close off if your reed is really, really soft. So you want a resilient reed to be able to hit those upper registers, but to get that brighter tone, you want to play on a softer side reed and not too much harder, I think. I mean, it just depends. There's a reed mouthpiece setup configuration. I could go into detail on a whole new topic there, but anyway, the more open your mouthpiece tip is, the softer the reed you want to use to get your optimum sound. The more closed a tip opening is, we're talking about this tip as it opens, the more closed, the harder the reed or the stronger the reed you want to use to get your optimum sound for that mouthpiece. All right, let's look at some artist names here. So in the rock funk fusion genre, lots of different names here, and I know I'm leaving a ton of people out, so don't hurt me. But David Sanborn, right? King Curtis, okay, that's a little bit more rock and roll. Michael Brecker, definitely. He's also in contemporary jazz, but he was starting here in this kind of genre of the funk and fusion. Junior Walker, more on the rock side. Eddie Harris, again, I'm going to mention for funk and fusion. Ernie Watts, Bob Mintzer, Bob Berg. These guys are all funky fusion. Maceo Parker, now that's the epitome of funk right there. I love Maceo Parker. He's just got this like really super strong rhythmic sense of time, and it's just fantastic. He doesn't use a lot of flashy fast notes. It's more rhythm and groove oriented or improvisation, which I really, really love. I just did one last week on rhythmic vocabulary, and he's got some fantastic rhythmic vocabulary. Very, very funky. Pee Wee Ellis also plays with Maceo Parker in his band, and they were both played for James Brown. So there's where that funk came from. Boots Randolph. Now, Boots Randolph was more kind of rock, but he's more, dare I say, country. He did do a recording of some recordings of country tunes in the late 50s and 60s. And he's also famous for recording the Benny Hill theme song, which is called Yakity Sax, right? And that's a very stylistic type of tune. Very campy, very corny. You've got the thick vibrato. You've got the growl tone. You know, the crazy people running around and all that. They're not crazy. I don't know. It's just funny comedic stuff. But Clarence Clemens. Now, Clarence Clemens also in contemporary, but I included him here as well. And then Lenny Pickett. Lenny Pickett is the leader now and of the Saturday Night Live band, but he also played in Tower of Power. If you go and look at some of these older recordings or videos of Tower of Power, and you see this dude, giant guy with a beard and huge fro with his saxophone, and he's doing these crazy dance moves. Like, I mean, like, it's serious dance moves. It's Lenny Pickett. It's the same guy. Just listen to any opening of Saturday Night Live theme song, and you're hearing Lenny Pickett. And that is some serious, serious, serious playing. All right. Now, to top it off, contemporary and pop saxophone, 80s to the present. There's so many. I can't even list everything here, but we're gonna talk about just some of the points of the style here. This is where we get the birth of the solo artist here, like really like real solo artists, where they start to become really famous, popular in contemporary music. I mean, we had solo artists back throughout history, but you see this style really focus on that. And you also get these type of players that will be featured in larger bands like rock bands or pop bands. Like let's see, what's the Baker Street, but la da 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 da, right? There's like that style, very kind of it's not as corny vibrato, but it's very vocalish. I don't know how else to say it. If you'll listen, that's like one of the most famous opening lines of a tune or saxophone solos, is that little saxophone line. I did play it when I'm back a year ago. We were doing I was doing some live streams, and I did a whole theme on pop and cheesy, corny saxophone stuff that also did Yakity Sax. But anyway, styles can vary greatly. We've got in contemporary playing and pop playing, jazz, contemporary jazz, smooth jazz, pop tunes, rock. Saxophone is such a versatile instrument now in this time and age that it started to be able to be featured in so many different types of styles, which I'm going to lump in as contemporary and pop. It's kind of like a coalition. They've coalesced. I can't talk today, guys. I'm sorry. Coalesced into this big overarching style, but it actually contains many styles. Highly personalized sounds, saxophone sounds. Artists are developing their own audiences with their styles here. I mean, that's been going on throughout, but now it's just kind of hard to really pinpoint it into a decade, is kind of what I'm saying here. It just starts to branch out all over the place like a tree with roots. I mean, you just can't, you can trace it all the way back, or tree with branches. You can trace it all the way back to, some of the first saxophone players, but it's just, there's so much more individuality now than there ever has been. And it's really quite amazing. Again, highly individualistic. Artists are aware of the history of previous styles and incorporate what they've learned previously into their own style. That's been happening since forever. But now it's to a point where it's just like, oh, I don't just have to know about the big band style. I probably need to know about the funk and fusion style, or the bebop style, or the rock style, or smooth jazz style. Use your own bag of tricks and what you've learned, right? That's what people are starting to do. They come up with their own stuff. Look at Kenny G, right? Kenny G used circular breathing as kind of one of his calling cards. And do you think that circular breathing was around before him? Of course it was. But Kenny G just happened to be the guy that hit it right on the head and made that famous, right? For his famous tune, Songbird. Go listen to Songbird. You'll know what I'm talking about if you don't already. So when you're playing nowadays with most bands, if it's a pop band or something contemporary, you want to be aware of all the styles of music and how to produce the sound and style of the music you are hired to perform or play. Perform. I think I meant one or the other there on that. All right, we're going to wrap it up here pretty soon. Contemporary pop musical references. Now, you could take some of the ones from my previous list and definitely lump them in here as well. But we got a large variety of some of the ones that I like to listen to. And there's so many more, friends. So many more than just on this. So get out there and listen. I mean, there's tons of people on YouTube doing their thing now. It's really incredible, the amount of saxophone players out there who I don't even know about. I'm still finding out about. But Kenny Garrett was one of those. Mark Turner, Chris Potter, my all-time favorite living saxophone player right now. Melissa Aldana, who is fantastic saxophonist. Joshua Redman, Donnie McCaslin, who got to play with David Bowie. Greg on his last record before David Bowie passed. Greg Osby, Miguel Zenon, Seamus Blake, Troy Roberts. I love Troy Roberts. He went to Frost School of Music in Miami. So he's done his degree there. And I think he's based out of Miami, going strong. Fantastic player and a super nice guy. Kenny G, Kirk Whalum, Grover Washington Jr., Kamasi Washington. There's tons. There's Najee. I could just keep going. There are so many. I think I'm leaving out Candy Dulfer. I love Candy Dulfer. I listened to her when Lily was here back in the 90s when she came out with that stuff. She's coming from that David Sanborn / Maceo Parker tradition. Mindy Abair, if you're liking more contemporary smooth jazz, check out Mindy Abair. So I can leave out. I can't include everybody, but if you go out there and look for it, you'll find it. But this is just a starting point for you. All right, so let's talk real quick about tips on playing stylistically. So you want to be aware, we've gone over a lot of styles, right? Let me just say this real quick. We've been over a lot of different styles, and I know it was kind of like a history lesson-ish, but we touched on some things that were indicative of these styles. You want to be able to emulate these styles when you can. So first, be aware of the genre and style of each song that you are playing. If you're playing Fly Me to the Moon, then you want to play some swingy jazz stuff. If you're playing Mustang Sally, you're probably not going to want to play as much jazz stuff. You want to play more pentatonic-y kind of stuff or bluesy kind of stuff or something that's really rooted in solid, rhythmic stuff that's not too complicated, that sounds like the style, right? Now, if you're writing your own tunes, that's a no holds barred. I'm not talking about your own tunes, okay? I'm not talking about your own compositions. You do what you want. It's your tune. If you're the creator, then you set the style. That's up to you. But I'm talking about playing in style for, let's say, getting hired to do a gig, or you're playing with a band that is doing a specific type of playing, or you're on a jazz gig, or you're on maybe you're playing an early jazz Dixieland kind of thing, where you got to play clarinet. Maybe you got to learn that, right? So that's all I'm saying is be aware of the style of the song that you're playing, unless you're taking creative liberties with it, or the band is taking creative liberties with it and doing it in a different style, right? There's a difference there. It's okay to step outside the box a little on a solo. You can add your own personality to the improvisation without compromising the integrity of the style of the song you are playing. So, I might be able to throw in maybe something a little bit jazzy here and there, but maybe, something that I'm hearing, but it's not like I'm not going to go superimpose Coltrane changes. You get what I'm saying here? And you discover how to do that over time. You have to be able to know the styles first before you can start to break out of that little box and add your own stuff into it. So experiment, play, learn styles, practice, and it's hard for me to demonstrate that here without the context of a band or anything, but if you want to know more about that, if you want to see me perform on some of this stuff, and I can show you what I'm talking about, you can hit me up through my website, austinvickrey.com. Just shoot me a message on my email, and I'm happy to talk to you about that and let you know where I'm at. You can come here and listen and ask questions. Learn your scales, chords, arpeggios, and music theory. Learn them. Learn them a lot. Know them well. The more tools you have, the more you're going to be able to express yourself and play the style needed. Okay, so learn that stuff. It's just basic musicianship, learning that stuff. You want to learn idiomatic phrases and licks for each style that you can play when you need to. So jazz, Charlie Parker lick, right? Blues stuff, pentatonic scale. You know, some of the other things, you know, like the growls, the scoops, the bends. You know, the more you listen to these styles, you pick up on the language and the vocabulary that these saxophone players are using. So learn some of that. So when you're playing, you know, Sissy Strut, you can play something that matches with that. You know, you can play in the style of that. And I'm not saying you have to play exactly like Junior Walker or King Curtis. You don't have to do that, but you can play in the style. There's a difference in playing the style and quoting them exactly all the time. You don't want to do that. So learn your inflections and advanced techniques, altissimos, growls, vibratos, scoops, bends, all that stuff. I think we talked about that. I did a master class that said earlier, this is all kind of tying together, isn't it? The advanced techniques in saxophone. All right, I covered that in a previous master class. So go check that out. We talk about that, those things exclusively. We really dive into it. And then find a solid, reliable, versatile mouthpiece or two. I have options. Now, if you have too many options, you start to kind of spread out a little. There's a difference between being a collector and being like obsessed. I am not a gear game obsessor. I can't do that. I don't have the money or the patience or I don't know. Some people have like hundreds of mouthpieces or even horns. Good for them. That's great. Not saying there's anything wrong with that. But if you want to be really good at one thing, you need to focus on one thing and then start branching out. Okay, you learn one thing first, then you learn another one, then you learn another one. Now, some people are different types of learners, so it doesn't matter. You know, maybe it doesn't matter to them, but for me, I need to go one step at a time. And I think the more focus you have on one thing, and then going to another, I think the better off you're going to be. That's just my opinion. I'm sure there's others that will disagree, and that's okay. We can have a disagreement. I think as long as you are performing and performing to the best of your ability, it sounds good, you're going to get hired, you keep getting hired, you're getting work. That's what matters. That's what matters to me, or it should matter to you. All right. In summary, many saxophone styles you should be familiar with as a saxophone player. We talked about the major little eras with their styles. Be able to play in as many styles as you can. The more versatile you are as a musician and a player, the more work you get. So it depends on your goal. Is your goal to work? Okay, learn all those styles. Learn. Is your goal to play just one style forever? Okay, you're not going to get as much work, probably. But hey, you do what you do you. I'm just saying I think it's important. For me, I have reasons. So, and I think they're fairly good reasons. So it just depends on your goals. If you're not sure, ask yourself, sit down with yourself, evaluate it. Say, okay, what are my goals here as a musician and as a player? Do I want to be versatile? Do I want to just do one thing? And some people are really good at doing their one thing, and they make money and they perform and they make a living, and that's great. So it just depends, okay? And then learning many saxophone styles helps you figure out your own style of playing. And I'm finally happy with, well, I'm happy with my sound on alto, but I'm always searching for more. I'm happy where I'm at in terms of my style of playing and my approach to different styles and my approach to improvisation, but I'm always trying to see what can I do better. Is there something new I don't know about? How can I find that out? What can I do? Basically, what can I do to be a better musician? So these are things you should be always asking yourself if you're a musician and you're looking to perform. Just always be searching, always be learning, always be studying. Do it to the best of your ability, and you will be successful. So that's it for me. I'm done.
Austin Vickrey, another awesome, great session. My goodness, I'm taking so many notes over here. I'm gonna have to rewind and apply as much of this as I can on the saxophone.
And then correct me if I'm misspoke in any way.
No, you know, when I listen to what you're saying, I mean, knowing all these different styles and having them in your toolbox, that's powerful. I mean, and you will get the call. And I think about, you know, all the different opportunities one would have if they knew how to do, you know, this style or that style, or whether, you know, not just bebop, but you mentioned rock, you mentioned even R&B, and those artists are going to expect you to not quite mix those genres together. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's going to be powerful for maybe a young musician that's saying, hey, I want to be a professional. Those are great nuggets of wisdom, because I've seen people play the wrong thing and then their phone stop ringing. And
that's exactly right. I've had it happen to me.
And, you know, you think about people that come through for theater, and, you know, we didn't really go into all of that. That's a whole different style too. So
absolutely.
If you're you know, you have a bag of things in your, I mean, a bunch of tools in your bag, then you'll get the call. So I want to thank you for really expounding on all of those genres. I mean, you talk about the greats, you talk about contemporary people that's out there doing it now, and it all still points to listen. So valuable to listen to the different styles. So we want to thank you, Austin, for another great session. And we want to remind everyone, you can always check out upcoming sessions, past sessions, and at our website, www.clearwaterjazz.com/education. And, you know, we do love to hear from you. You can email us at info@clearwaterjazz.com. You know, keep telling everyone about the great teaching and all the instruction you are receiving right here, free, with Clearwater Jazz. This is awesome. It's amazing. Whether you're a seasoned musician, you're a professional, or a beginner, this is going to be something that's going to help everyone. So thank you again, Austin. And we're going to look forward to seeing you on the next one. Keep it swinging, everyone. I'm your guest host, Michael Kernodle, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.